It's official. Chris Klieman is out at Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into another episode of Locked On Kansas State. I'm your host, Christian Rao. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen of the day, part of the number one sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you Wildcat coverage like nobody else. And we're talking about Chris Klieman yet again, and it's official that Chris Klieman will be retiring from Kansas State. The press conference has just concluded. They talked about the recruiting class of the 2026. We'll get to that in just a little bit. We'll talk about that towards the end. We're going to have a full recap and full breakdown of every single player on the channel across the next few days. But obviously, the big breaking news is that Chris Klieman will no longer be the head coach at Kansas State. Before we dive deeper into that, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. It's interesting. First off, you get the packed press conference. It was packed to the gills in this one. And when Chris Klieman walked in, he got a standing ovation, much deserved. He got a standing ovation when he left the podium as well. He did not take any questions. So we're going to hear more about this in the future from Chris Klieman, I assume. Probably not in the near future, probably in a week's time, but we did not get any questions from him. It was just a statement. He was very emotional for good reason. You're moving on from what is your life mission, being a football coach, and now saying that you're gone. But what he said, and I think this is really important to take from, he said he was at peace. And colleagues, former players, parents of players, he said they all reached out to him, congratulated him on his career. He sounded like he was very at peace with the situation. And the way that we saw him over the last couple weeks, after the Utah game, after the Colorado game, you could tell that he was a little bit tired. You could tell that there was a little bit of exhaustion in his demeanor, if you will. And the fact that he said that he's at peace is really nice to do that. He focused on why he was in the business when he was talking about the colleagues and the players and the parents of players. And he said that is the impact that he wanted to be a part of. And he said that he feels like he had a successful career because of that. And he focused on that mainly because it sounds like the reason that he's leaving the industry is kind of what we speculated, is that with this new world of NIL, this new world of the transfer portal, the rev share era, things like that, is making it not a fun place to be a part of in this industry when you're talking about the rev share and people not following the new rev share. Gene Taylor, the athletic director, spoke about that. We'll get to that in just a second. He said, this is another thing too, maybe this helps with his thing being at peace. He said, for the first time ever, I'm putting my family first. He is proud of what he accomplished. And I think that's talking about his past in the FCS and also at Kansas State. And I think there's a lot to be excited about for what you did at Kansas State. Nobody expected him to have a successful career at Kansas State. Obviously, you go from Bill Snyder to Ron Prince, and that era did not work. You had to go back to Bill Snyder yet again, and then you bring in Chris Klieman. And Gene Taylor said it perfectly. He said that the way that you have to coach after a legendary coach like Bill Snyder is that if things go wrong, people are always going to compare you to a guy that has a statue outside the stadium. When you are turning around and you're getting ready to yell at your coaches up in the booth, you're going to see Bill Snyder Family Stadium and the name across the stadium. You are always going to live in a shadow of a legendary coach. And not only did Chris Klieman do that successfully, getting yourself to a Big 12 championship in 2022, getting to a bowl game in every year, but the COVID year, so you might as well just say every single year, because the COVID year doesn't matter in anyone's eyes in college football or really in life, right? It's a successful career for Chris Klieman. And there's a lot to take from this as well. Obviously, there's the reports that Colin Klein is going to be taking over as the head coach at Kansas State. Athletic director Gene Taylor was kind of like, hang on, not so fast, my friend. He was at the emotion that he hasn't made any type of contact yet. Not sure if that was just a little bit of, dare I say, coach speak, although we're talking about athletic director Gene Taylor, or just kind of giving the respect to Chris Klieman because that was his moment. And if either is the case, that's fine. But if there has also been reports that Colin Klein has been hired and nothing is happening, then that's a huge problem in itself. We don't want that head coaching drama. We want it just to be Colin Klein and that it moving forward. Gene Taylor was very emotional as well in this one. He was very emotional coming up to the podium, said how much he hates him just for what he did to him in the in a joking matter because he was so emotional. He said he's been a mess all day, and you can tell there's a very good friendship, a very good relationship between Gene Taylor and Chris Klieman. Of course, that is something we've all known for quite some time. He said that the reason that Chris Klieman is leaving, and this is really important, I think this is something that we have to pay attention to. I think that Chris Klieman will not be the last person to follow suit. He's not the first, but he said he's doing this because where we are in this industry. And he's talking about this rev share, the fact that you're in the wild, wild west, the fact that you don't really have any type of ways to control this. And he said, we have to find a way to get it under control. People ignoring the rules of the settlement. It's just not, it's making an unfair advantage, an unfair competitive advantage when it comes to playing college football and college athletics in general. And when you're trying to be a coach that you're trying to, coach men, coach football players on and off the field, because with coaching, it comes more than just the performance on the field. There's a lot more to it in the eyes of the old traditional coaching. That stuff goes away when it's all about money. And right now, a lot of people feel like it's out of control. You can say that's a scapegoat. You can say that's something to do with some of these smaller programs. If you want to put Kansas State in the Power 4 smaller program area, I don't know if you want to have that discussion, but either way, if you want to, if that's something that you want to put yourself into, you can say that that's an excuse. But I think it's a very fair assessment of what's going on in college athletics these days. There's a lot of unknowns. We're seeing things happening right now in your own conference with BYU. Perfect example, BYU almost lost their head coach, and they hammered down and said, not only are we going to give you extension, but we're going to put $10 to $15 million into NIL, which over the rev share, all that good stuff. They're not following the rules. And then you're seeing it obviously happen with other big name schools as well. Ohio State, Notre Dame, LSU, you name it. Texas Tech, what they did in the portal this year, a lot of things, which I kind of found it humorous because Gene Taylor brought up the fact that if anybody is going to support him in getting this back under control, he said his Big 12 counterparts. And two of the schools in the Big 12 right now are kind of following suit. It's an adapt or die situation. Don't get me wrong. And when you're talking about older coaches, Nick Saban in Alabama, perfect one that comes to mind. It was an adapt or die situation for him. He didn't want to be a part of this rev share, this NIL world anymore. He decided to retire while he was ready to go. Chris Klieman's in the same boat. It's exactly what Chris Klieman did on this one as well. Gene Taylor brought up some interesting stuff. Obviously mentioned that he hasn't had any conversations with a head coach at the moment or for the coaching search. I kind of find that fictional. I'm not going to lie. I think that's pretty fictional. I think there has been some conversations. Usually we don't get those type of reports about them targeting or them going after a certain player or coach, if you will, unless there's been some sort of actual positive speculation, right? Some actual truth behind it. But again, I think that was just because they wanted to give Chris Klieman his moment. And I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But tomorrow, we need to have almost like a guarantee that Colin Klein will be the head coach at Kansas State. The bowl game is something that we talked about in the earlier episode today, where there was a report that Colin Klein would stay with Texas A&M and Chris Klieman would coach the bowl game. There sounds like, from what we've heard from Gene Taylor, is that he's going to get the players' perspective on not only if who's going to coach the bowl game, but if they actually want to participate in the bowl game. That's how I heard it. I heard it that there's a possibility that maybe they opt out of the bowl game. So we might not have an extra game to send off Chris Klieman, unless I heard that wrong. But it sounded like from Gene Taylor, it sounded like the question was asked twice. And the second time around, it was really focused on the way that he answered it was he's going to get with the players and see if they still want to participate in the bowl game, get their perspective on that one. Overall, this is a really crazy time for college athletics, really crazy time for Kansas State, and Chris Klieman moving on, and potentially Colin Klein coming to Kansas State. The recruiting class, let's get to that real quick before we head out on this episode, this bonus reaction show of Locked On Kansas State. The recruiting class, though, huge. No changes, no big moves right now, and 23 overall players commit on early National Signing Day. Kansas State's class of 2026 comprised of 19 high school prospects, 4 community college transfers for an overall of 23 overall players. There are 11 players on offense, 9 on defense, 2 specialists, and 1 athlete. The biggest thing that I like about this is that they talked about, obviously, the ones that signed on today on Wednesday, all 23. 17 of those 23 plan to enroll at Kansas State for the spring semester in 2026. So 17 of the 23 signees are going to be early enrollees for Kansas State. That's huge. That means they'll be there for spring, they'll be there for summer, they'll be there for fall, all you name it. You're getting them early. That's a whole extra semester of being with the program. So if there is any possibility, there's obviously going to be turnover. There's no doubt about that. You're still going to get some sort of roster turnover when it comes to this program. Hopefully it's not the major players that we're discussing, the Avery Johnsons, the Jace Browns, Lincoln Cures, Austin Romains, you name it. But the fact that you're getting 17 of these 23 guys going into the spring semester is huge. That means whatever the new coaching staff, because it'll be obviously ready to go by then, you bring in a transfer portal class, they can all prepare together and get ready to go to get back to the top of the Big 12 in 2026. Should the expectations for Kansas State still remain at 6-6 in 2026 if Colin Klein is the head coach? If he keeps retention, no, I think you can say the expectations can go right back to where they were at the beginning of this season. And if you believe in the talent, and if you believe that maybe they're in the right direction moving forward. Obviously, a lot more to speculate heading into the next couple of weeks, a lot more to discuss in what his support staff and his assistant coaching staff, or if it's Colin Klein at all. Sounds like there's just a small amount of mystery for who the next Kansas State head coach is going to be. At least Gene Taylor tried to make it sound a little bit of a mystery. Maybe they're still working out some contracts, some numbers, and he didn't want to make it sound like it was a sure thing. But I find it very hard to believe that if there's a report for Colin Klein to be the next head coach of Kansas State, that Gene Taylor has any leverage whatsoever to bring back Optimus Klein back to Kansas State. Let me know what you think. Obviously, this is crazy. Did you wake up this morning and expect this news to drop, that Chris Klieman would be retiring from Kansas State, that potentially, most likely it sounds like, Colin Klein is the next head coach, and then 23 signees for the Kansas State 2026 class? We're going to break down all 23 of them on the channel over the next couple of days. So stay tuned. And of course, any new breaking news from this, we'll make sure you have you covered. All of this on Locked On Kansas State. Until then, please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.